I mean, 3 times he was referred to prevent, and 3 times nothing was done. So much was known about his intentions.
It was an appalling failure. But what I think the political element that Nigel Farage is really kicking hard here is why the police withheld for so long what they knew about the killer. The fact that he'd been developing ricin, and also he downloaded an IS terror manual. So there was the suggestion when the riots were going on that there was a terrorism link, completely repudiated by the police. And now the question is, why was this information... If the information had come out perhaps straight away that he was born of a Rwandan family who were Christian, maybe it wouldn't have... But that's where the idea of cover-up's coming in, and that's what the authorities have to answer.
Could the police not argue that they were basically following the regulations and the laws about contempt of court, that they didn't want to be seen to be prejudicing a potential trial?
Well, that will all come out in the inquiry, I'm sure. But that's where you're going to keep seeing reform and the Tories pushing hard on this. Jonathan
Ashworth, what's the cover-up?
I find it so difficult to talk about this story because I've got an 11-year-old daughter. She's been going to a dance club on a Saturday since she was about 5. I know how much joy it brings her, how much joy it brings us as parents when we go to watch them dancing. I just find it a very, very difficult story to talk about. But I'll try and put my emotions aside and say this. Look, I think it was the first paper you referred to, the Daily Express, who really asked the right question. Why wasn't he stopped? He was flagged up to the various agencies. There's an agency called Prevent, which is supposed to look into people who are considered to be dangerous, who are sort of interested or pursuing sort of terrorism fantasies and things like that. They're supposed to deal with these people, and other agencies were clearly looking into this. Why wasn't this flagged up? Why wasn't it dealt with? So, to the extent, was there a cover-up? I don't think that's really the right phrase in this.
It's a phrase that Nigel Farage...
Well, I think that is an unhelpful phrase, actually. It's not really about sort of what should have been said pre the trial, because there would have been issues about ensuring that the trial wasn't, you know, it was a proper trial, that none of it was prejudicing the trial. The key question here is, why did the Prevent, social services, the police, all the agencies who would have been involved in this not deal with this?
Well, let's put that question to Jonathan Hall, KC. Jonathan Hall, this is your area of expertise. What do you think this morning? Was it a conspiracy or was it a cock-up?
Well, I suspect that it was advice from the CPS. The effect was disastrous, so I've got no doubt about this, that more information should have been put into the public domain. And I think there was a very, very poor 8 hours after the immediate attack where social media went completely mad. And it was really up to the authorities, I think, to give a calm, sober, honest and authoritative account of what they could say. The contempt of court rules, they are difficult. And I know that journalists find them hard, but frankly, this man was only ever going to be convicted of murder or manslaughter. And it really is hard to see why more information couldn't have been given to the public. They were crying out for it. I mean, I was desperate to know. When I was on holiday, I heard about the terrible attack. Of course, I wanted to know who was doing it. And there was a long period where nothing was said. So I think that how the CPS, how the police, how the authorities approach giving information when these terrible attacks occurs has to be thought about in the new social media age. Just saying nothing is no longer an option.
What do you think, Jonathan Hall, should have been said in the wake of the murders that might have stopped the riots?
I don't know what was in the minds of the rioters, but name, background, ethnicity, what they could say about whether he was acting alone, the fact that if this was the case, counterterrorism police were investigating, but they didn't know at that stage whether or not it was a terrorist attack. All the things the public wanted to know. And it's very hard to see, frankly, that any of that would have made a difference to the fairness of the trial, whether he had come in on a small boat, whether he was born here. These were all the questions that were being addressed by the social media lies. And I don't think any of those would have prejudiced the trial at all.
But this is all the discussion about after the fact, after the murders. What about what the authorities knew before the murders, well before the murders, weeks and months before the murders, which clearly, to anybody with 2 brain cells to rub together, flagged up this guy as an extremely dangerous individual, and yet nothing was done to prevent him?
Okay, this is about Prevent, and Prevent was born because of Islamist terrorists coming out of Al-Qaeda. So in the 2000s, things like the 7/7 London transport attacks, it was about trying to deprogram radicalized individuals who had emirs, so leaders of an Islamist group, who had swallowed the propaganda of people like Anwar and al-Awlaki. It was not designed, frankly, for the modern era where lone actors become radicalized on their own and take it into their own heads, sometimes because of a whole mix of things, or perhaps no ideology at all, to carry out an attack. So actually, it's a problem with Prevent. And I have some sympathy, I have to say, with the people who are trying to wrestle with this. If you look at the guidance, even now on the internet at the moment, 2 police officers, what happens if you have a person who's obsessing about school massacres? At the moment, they would get weeded out of the Prevent system. So it's right that there was knowledge of this individual, but also it's right to say that Prevent was not designed for people who were fixated on violence, but not necessarily at risk of being drawn into terrorism.
So can you explain to viewers who are very confused about the fact that this individual was not considered a terrorist by police, even though ricin was found, even though an Al-Qaeda handbook was found? What is the difference between someone who has those things and is violent and commits murder and a terrorist?
Well, he is a terrorist because he's been convicted of having a terrorist manual. The question that you're really asking me is what was in his head when he did that terrible, terrible attack? What was his motive? Now, we know that he looked at this manual in 2021, but the attack was in 2024. And look, I've got no doubt the prosecution in this case are very, very experienced. The judge is very, very experienced. On Thursday, I've got no doubt that the prosecution will explain to the court and in effect to the public what their thinking is. But it appears to me fairly obvious that on the evidence that they had, they simply couldn't say what was going through this man's mind. And I know that does sound bizarre. Why else would you carry out some terrible attack like this? But I think all I can say is, in the world that I occupy, you do get these cases that on the face of it look like terrorism, but actually when you look at the evidence, it appears to be something completely different. So we'll wait and see what the evidence is on Thursday, but it doesn't necessarily follow that that was what was going through his mind when he carried out this terrible, terrible attack.
No, but there was something terrible going through his mind. And technically, as you've explained, it may not have been, strictly speaking, terrorism, but whatever it was clearly very, very dangerous. Surely there should be some kind of machinery in the system where an organisation like Prevent, for example, can look at someone like him and say, well, actually, he doesn't quite fit our criteria. He isn't quite why we were made, why we were formed, but we can see, nevertheless, he's very dangerous. And we will then pass that information on to the police so they can intervene and stop him, prevent him from committing a terrible crime.
Yes, and you've put your finger completely on it. And I think this raises the question, which I call the sort of, who are you going to call question? So when he was filtered out of Prevent, who could counter-terrorism police who are responsible for Prevent, who could they call? Who could they ask to pick up the risk? And at the moment, I'm not confident that that system exists to manage people who are obsessed by violence, but not terrorists.
Jonathan Hall, thank you very much indeed for joining us, the UK Independent Reviewer of Terrorism Legislation. Can I just ask, before we let you go, as the independent reviewer, do you make any recommendations at this point to the government?
All the time I'm talking to government, all the time I'm being asked about my views, and I'm sure I will be.
Because the problem seems to be that we haven't learned anything in the last 24 hours, which reassures us that this couldn't happen again.
Well, if you look at the announcement the Home Secretary made just before Christmas, if you look at it in the light of what we now know, you can see the government was thinking about that because they talked about Prevent not necessarily being right. They did talk about violent, fixated people. Look, we're going to learn lessons, I'm sure. And we're going to have, by the way, I think you're right, we're going to have to act at pace because there is a gap. And in fact, it's a gap that I've been aware of for some time. Because, to go back to it, the importance of the internet and the fact that now, I'm afraid, lone individuals often become highly, highly dangerous on their own probably in their bedrooms, and there's no real way of managing them. So you're right, I can't give you an immediate answer, but it's obviously something that the whole system, and myself included, are going to have to deal with.
Jonathan Hall, thank you very much indeed.
That's fascinating.
Isn't it?
But he's right, the delay was catastrophic. We've not seen riots like that in Britain.
OK, so there are two issues here, and let's make them separate.
Yeah.
One is, clearly, the authorities knew about this individual. He wasn't considered at that stage to have reached the threshold of terrorism where Prevent, the organisation which is set up to de-radicalise people, should intervene. So why wasn't he stopped by
that was catastrophic.
Another authority? And the second is, when all the rumours, false rumours about the fact he was an asylum seeker, he was a Muslim, he was on an MI6 watch list, a false name was put out, why that information wasn't cleared up immediately.
Which they could have. And people are... And Jonathan used the expression, he said, he was a terrorist. People are baffled that he's not being charged with terrorism because...
Well, he was charged with 2 terrorism offences, but the attacks weren't considered a terrorist attack.
It's very hard to get your head around that. And it was being said again and again at the time, this was not terror-related, and they were taking the public for fools. That's what I think.
Well, it seems that basically he was allowed to commit these grotesque murders on a technicality, almost. That even though his behaviour and the evidence that was found in his home was clearly extremely serious, it didn't seem to fit any particular category, so people sat on their hands.
Yeah.
I think this is... I mean, you're right, there are 2 issues here, and both of them need to be looked into properly by this inquiry that Keir Starmer is setting up, and apparently he's going to be talking later this morning.
At 8:30 this morning, live, and we'll bring that to you on Good Morning Britain.
So on this point about Prevent, which, I mean, the viewers may not have heard of Prevent before, might know a lot about, not know a lot about it. When I was the MP in Leicester, I mean, I dealt with Prevent, I met Prevent, because, sadly, there were occasions when there were concerns about particular individuals in Leicester, and as in a very confidential way as a Member of Parliament, I would quite properly have meetings and discussions with Prevent. But it's absolutely right. There comes a point where Prevent doesn't feel like he can do anything about it, and there has been a failure of that system. So what do you actually do with this individual, an individual such as this, which has been flagged up...
And the information which has been related about them.
But Prevent can no longer resolve the issues with that individual. There was a gap there that has to be looked into. This system has to be reformed. And actually, you know, Nigel Farage is making hay with this. There are other prominent politicians who should know better, because some of the other politicians were actually sat in Conservative cabinets and were responsible for Prevent while these failures were going on. So I think politicians trying to exploit this for political reasons should step back, you know, cool temperatures, let the inquiry get to the bottom of this and look at how we properly reform Prevent.
Because is there a way in which this vile creature could have been taken off the streets?
Exactly.
Because he was such a threat, such a risk. Is there not a way they can use the law to do that? Because of his mental health? Isn't that one way of doing it?
The obvious step, I heard somebody discussing this last night on LBC Radio, would be to section him.
Well,
because quite obviously he was not thinking straight.
No.
His sanity was called into question. Why he couldn't have been sectioned,
exactly,
and presumably given some kind of treatment, mental treatment, is an open question.
Yeah, that he should have not been allowed to be on the streets. That's the point.
And another question. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut across you, Andrew. The other question should be also, if I was in the government, I would be asking Prevent and these other services, what other people have they got on their books, as it were? You know,
well,
because we don't want this happening
the case
again.
Either. I mean, how many other cases are there like this which are unfolding as we speak?
Yeah. And how was his brain polluted? Did he radicalise himself at home on a computer? We've got to look into all of this.
So, as we say, we will be hearing from the Prime Minister at 8:30. Enormous concern about that case. I mean, and our hearts go out to the families of those little girls who died.
At least one relief for the families. This monster pleaded guilty. So it's not going to be an extended 4-week trial. Yeah. They are spared that agony. That's something. At the very least. OK, yesterday,
Did you sit through the entire
Yes.
presidential inauguration
Yes.
speech?
Yes.
Did you, Jonathan?
I did.
Right.
I bet you were loving it, weren't you?
was.
I bet you were.
I was.
I bet you had I bet you had the stars and stripes. I bet you were singing along to
What was
it.
your highlight?
I still thought what was extraordinary, because it was indoors rather than outside, the former president and the vice president were within touching distance of him as he eviscerated their programme.
It was funny, wasn't it?
It was extraordinary. And then you saw Hillary Clinton at one point laughing and Joe Biden doing the sign of the cross as he just piled on the criticism. It was an extraordinary performance by Trump.
Yeah, Hillary Clinton, I think, laughing was when he said that he was going to rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. Joe Biden makes the sign of a cross, separately. He does literally trash all of their legacies within a couple of minutes.
Normally, the convention is the new president is a bit politer, but not this bloke.
No,
and
not
that's a
this
sign
guy.
of how things is going to be in the next 4 years.
What did you think of Melania's hat? Do you think she knew what she was doing in selecting that brim?
Well, it meant she couldn't kiss her husband.
It meant he couldn't, his lips couldn't get close to her. What did you think?
I thought she looked fabulous, actually.
Yes, I thought she looked
stunning.
splendid
I think
hat.
she's stunning.
It was... right, she looked fabulous. The hat was an odd choice.
Yes.
You think? Yes.
I quite liked it.
Well, no, it looks great, but it totally means that she socially distances from her husband, who is the president, who is the star of the show. He can't even get to her cheek.
I know.
She must have known what she was doing.
Yes.
She must have rehearsed that.
But they were holding hands and stuff.
They were holding hands, that's true.
I mean, she's an extraordinary woman. Amazing.
For putting up with President Trump?
But again, look, you know, also, I know Trump is 78, Biden's 82. The age gap between them looked enormous, didn't it?
He's full of energy, isn't
really
he, President Trump?
And I said this yesterday about him.
I thought Biden fell asleep at one point early on in the
and he
proceedings.
Looked even more doddery than normal. Yeah. And the First Lady looked like she'd swallowed a nest of bees. The former First Lady, rather, Mrs Biden. And but it was optimism and he was upbeat. And again, why is it, we've never heard any of this from Keir Starmer.
Of course, the question is, how much of what he said he's going to do yesterday is he actually going to do? For example, is America now a country of two genders?
Brilliant. I mean, that was jaw-dropping when I heard that. I thought, blimey, it's the end of wokery.
Yeah,
End of wokery. I mean, it's going to be... And it's going to be a roller coaster. It's going to be a roller coaster for America. It's going to be a roller coaster for the rest of the world. Yeah. I mean, there is a sort of, to make it be sort of boring for a moment, there is a sort of serious point here.
Not for the first time, Jonathan.
There is a serious point here, which is what's going to happen to the global economy.
Yeah.
Because he's talking about slapping tariffs on all their imports. And we do export a bit. It's not, you know, it's not as big as some other bits of the world, but we do export billions to America. And if he's putting tariffs on what we export over there...
It means that British goods sold in America will be far more expensive.
Exactly.
Which is going to affect how many goods are bought in America.
That'll have an impact here.
And do we respond tit for tat?
Yeah, exactly. So it's going to be... This is going to have big repercussions the world over.
Yeah.
But also, maybe we know he can't stand the European Union. He doesn't like... Is this a great opportunity for Britain to finally do a trade deal with the United States? Post-Brexit.
Yeah, well, that would... It's taken 8-9 years and we still haven't got that since we Brexited.
More likely with Trump.
Yeah.
It didn't happen the first time,
it didn't.
did it?
No.
I wouldn't hold your breath for that.
What kind of a backlash are we going to see, a green backlash are we going to see about his statement that he's pulling America out of the Paris Climate Change Treaty?
And he's going to drill, baby drill.
Drill, baby drill. And he's cancelling all these licences for wind farms.
Yep.
Also, I thought one of the weird things was he sort of said, I'm putting an end to the electric vehicle sort of campaign. He's got Elon Musk, who owns a massive electric vehicle company in his cabinet. So if anyone thought there was some kind of weird corruption going on between Musk and Trump, where Musk would influence everything Trump does, whatever was going on, he's failed in that regard,
I'd like to have
hasn't
seen
he?
Trump's face when he used that, Musk's face when he used that expression.
Well, when Trump said that he was going to go to Mars and put the stars and stripes on Mars, you did get Elon Musk give the two thumbs up, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, so they're going to go to Mars. But, I mean, look, on this electric vehicle thing, America does manufacture some of this, and there'll be some of their workers who think that, well, if electric vehicles are going to be made, I'd rather they were made in America than China. So... in the end, I think he'll make decisions in the interests of the economy, rather than what some of his supporters want to hear on that front.
What about our response? I mean, he's not just drilling for gas for America. He wants to sell gas to us.
Yeah.
Are we going to basically hide behind America's skirts on this and say, OK, yeah, well, thank you, we will buy your cheap gas and to hell with the planet?
Well, I mean, this comes back to the point about these tariffs, you know, what we import and what we export, actually, and how that's going to affect us. I mean, look, we are hoping as a country that we get better deals with America, that we're not subject to these huge, big tariffs that he's talking about putting on countries such as China. But look, we don't know what's going to come next. No. It is literally going to be a roller coaster, and it will twist and turn.
What he has said is that he is going to pardon and release the 1,500. I hadn't even realised how many it was.
So many,
rioters from the January the 6th insurrection. That's a huge... And one of them was in prison for 22 years. That's going to be quite the release, isn't it, from prison today, if it happens as early as today.
Yeah,
they're all exonerated.
And I was very struck by the fact he was making this speech, the greatest political comeback, in the very place where those rioters stormed the building and tried to cancel the previous election bill.
Exactly.
Unbelievable.
What did you think of his description of them as hostages?
That's what he considers them to be, political hostages.
Well, he lost that election fair and square.
I know.
I mean, move on, Mr President. You're the President of the United States again.
And foreign policy, the Panama Canal, he says he's going to take it back from China. He says, we gave it to Panama, not China. China's nicked it. We're having it back, thank you very much.
Good luck with that.
And the Gulf of Mexico being now the Gulf of America.
Yeah.
He didn't mention Greenland, though, did he? I thought
No, he
didn't.
No, he didn't sign an executive order on Greenland.
Or make Canada the 51st state, which is the other thing he's been talking about.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
how successful, Jonathan Ashworth? I don't know how well you know Lord Mandelson, but he is going to be, if all the boxes are ticked, our ambassador to the United States. And that, obviously, as you talk about the economy, political ties, tariffs, that's going to be a crucial connection. How effective do you think Lord Mandelson will be with Trump?
Well, I do know Peter Mandelson reasonably well. He's a wily operator.
Yeah,
right. What does that mean?
He's a cunning old fox.
I think he knows what he's doing. I think he'll be a very effective voice for UK interests.
Has he met Trump before?
I mean, I don't know the answer to that.
He's been very rude about him.
Right.
Very rude about him.
That's not going to help.
No, as has the Foreign Secretary.
Yeah, but look, I mean, I know, not you, Andrea, but I know there's sort of various commentators on, Tory-ish commentators salivating at the prospect of Donald Trump sort of humiliating, this Labour government. But, I'm a patriot. I will always put British interests first, and it's in our interest that we have a good relationship with the US. I want Peter Mandelson to sit.
OK, can I just ask then, Nigel Farage is closer to Donald Trump than any other British politician. Will Lord Mandelson be asking Nigel Farage for help when it comes to negotiating with Trump? Will they go together into the Oval Office?
Well, I mean, look, Peter Mandelson is a smart, wily operator, and I'm sure he'll want
I don't know what that means, Jonathan. He's a smart, wily... Is he going to get on with Trump? Is he going to ask Nigel Farage to help? Is he going to rely on him?
I'm sure he will pull all the levers that
He's the ultimate snake oil salesman, and he'll do a deal with Nigel Farage if he has to.
Right.
Gets him access to...
What I noticed watching yesterday was he went on and on and on and on and on, and not one single person left the stage for a pee. Which is a good thing to note.
Where this is going.
I only mentioned this because this morning research has come out to say that what many of us have suspected all our lives, the urge to pee is contagious.
Right.
When one person says that they need a pee, or they maybe sidle off to the gents or to the ladies, others will follow. It's a contagious instinct.
Isn't that an age thing?
Pardon?
Isn't that an age thing?
I don't know, but apparently it's true. Yawning and laughter, apparently, have always been seen as infectious, liable to spread. But now a study of chimpanzees kept in captivity in Japan suggests that when one chimp goes for a pee, male or female, they all go. We're hardwired, basically, to urinate as one.
Why do scientists waste their time doing this?
I know, you're so right.
Aren't there more important things that they could be looking into? How to cure cancer or stop global warming? But this, it's ridiculous. We don't need to know.
Well, I just thought you might have an insight.
Apparently, there is a an impact when chimps lower in the social dominance ranks are more likely to pee after more dominant apes go first. It's called the trickle-down effect.
Oh, very good, very
And
good.
that's according to the Times this morning.
Fascinating.
Thank you, Reece Blakely. Fascinating.
You were just bursting to tell us that.
Yeah, thank you.